There's a listener of this show, Timeless with Julie Hartman, who is a ninth grader at a California public high school. And he bravely sent to me his curriculum for the ethnic studies course that he is taking this semester. I exposed this curriculum in the episode called Woke Indoctrination Exposed, and it turns out that people like to see woke indoctrination exposed. It got such a good response that today I'm doing a part 2. We're going to be looking at the final project in this ethnic studies course. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, welcome to Timeless. It is great, as always, to be with you. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman, and I also want to make you aware of my email address, which is julie@julie-hartman.com. On days like today, where I am exposing a curriculum that someone sent to me, I am especially motivated to make you aware of my email address and how much I want you to contact me. And I just want you to know, too, that if you do send me something, whether it's a curriculum or a pamphlet that you have at your workplace that you think is particularly woke and rancid and that you want me to talk about, I will always maintain your privacy and anonymity because I don't want you to get fired or reprimanded for speaking the truth. That's my job to do, and I'm always grateful when people send me things like this. So shout out to that brave student who has sent me this final project assignment in his ethnic studies course. Now, I talked about this a bit in the Woke Indoctrination Exposed episode, but I want to remind you that California has become the first state to require ethnic studies in order to graduate from high school. Now, this doesn't take full effect until the 2029-2030 school year, but a lot of high schools across the state have already implemented these ethnic studies courses. And one of the biggest issues that I take with the course, in addition to the content and the way that things are being taught, is that when we are seeing such a crisis in American education, specifically with test scores. Reading scores are the lowest they've been in 30 years. Math scores have seen similar trends. Eighth graders in the United States have record low scores in civics and history. When we are seeing trends like those, having a required ethnic studies course, I think, is not the best use of students' time, especially after all of the loss of learning and school time during the lockdowns. This is not really how hours of the day in public high schools ought to be spent. So that's my global problem with it. Another global problem that I have with this course is that, again, pertaining to the content, the way that ethnic studies in this course is taught, I think really solidifies some very damaging and dangerous ways of thinking, as well as many divisions in our society that are being kind of frothed up as a result of courses like these. In the last episode, I showed you a slide where the teacher divided a person based on the categories which she said made that person oppressed and made that person privileged. And we see that in the oppressed category, it was if you're a woman, if you're a black person, if you're a minority, if you are homosexual or transgender, then that means that you fall into the oppressed category. And then we saw characteristics like being white, being straight, being affluent fell into the privileged category. And that is just such a terrible way to look at people. And it is especially terrible given that one of the main problems in society that people lament, including the teacher in this course laments, is that we have allegedly judged people too much based on their immutable characteristics, right? Like that is a huge part of this course, that people in this country have been discriminated against based on their skin color. And that is absolutely true, that racism has existed and to some extent continues to exist. No one is denying that. But if we lament the fact that we in the United States historically judged people based on immutable characteristics, why are we creating courses such as these, which are encouraging students to do the same thing, to look at someone and go, okay, if you're white, then you're privileged. If you're black, then you're not privileged. If you're straight, then you're privileged. If you're gay, then you're not privileged. That is succumbing to the same type of bias and simple thinking that we apparently are so ashamed of. So why do we continue to perpetuate it? Looking, though, at this final project, there are some other qualms that I have with this course, which we're about to dive into, and I'll divide them into two categories. The first is the methods, or the kind of way that students are being encouraged and directed to approach research and studying. I think it's very academicized, overly jargony, and just not conducive to actually developing good skills. That's the first problem. And the second problem is the kind of whole vision of the project itself, which is to take these big social issues that the teacher is saying really exist in our society and doing a kind of report and action plan to combat those issues. There's nothing wrong with wanting to change or combat certain issues, but to expect ninth graders to go out and do something as grandiose as this, I just think, again, is kind of leading them in the wrong direction. So let's dive in here. First, on the first page, I'm just going to give you a background of how this teacher is setting up this final project. So she says, we've spent this semester studying the social, cultural, political, historical, and economic expressions and experiences of race and identity in the United States. We've highlighted the roles that people of color have played in shaping U.S. culture and society and the ways that they have resisted different forms of oppression. Building on your knowledge of various communities and social movements, we'll be designing and putting our own community responsive projects into action. As I said a few moments ago, I don't have any problem, nor do I know any conservative who has any problem with teaching students about the roles that people of color have played in shaping U.S. culture, or the ways that they have been oppressed or discriminated against and have resisted that. No one has issues with that. What I take issue with is that in at least my reading of these course materials, that seems to be the whole story that is taught. The oppression narrative, mainly. And again, of course there has been oppression, but is there any acknowledgement of how much the United States has done to rectify the wrongs of our past? How much we have striven forward to build the most diverse nation on the face of the planet? Where is that acknowledgement? We don't ever see in these course materials, again, I could be missing something, but I've read through them and I haven't seen this myself. We haven't seen them talk about e pluribus unum, which is our national credo. E pluribus unum means out of many one, out of many different nationalities, religions, genders, races. We are all one American people. That kind of ethos, which is now being under attack, that kind of ethos has created a remarkable level of tolerance and diversity in our society. But again, we don't see any of that in this first sentence. There's no, they're basically summarizing what the course is about. And they say the roles that people of color have played and the way that they've resisted forms of oppression. There's nothing about all the work that the United States has done to create the remarkable system that we have. For all this course talks about immigrants, there's also not an acknowledgement of why the vast majority of the world's immigrants flock to our shores. Those are mostly non-white individuals who are coming to the United States, begging and clawing and risking their lives to just get into our territory. Why are they doing that? They are doing that because we have created this remarkable tolerant system which allows people of such diverse backgrounds to come here and make it on their own merit and thrive in this country. Don't you think an ethnic studies course ought to acknowledge something like that? I think it's sick, if you ask me, that they don't acknowledge that. But again, let's go on. So this final project is about apparently putting a community responsive project into action. So let's read here more specifics. The youth participatory action research is a sort of community-based research approach that engages youth in identifying, investigating, and addressing social issues that affect their lives. This approach is grounded in the belief that you are an expert of your own experiences and have the power to make a difference in your own community. And then we see here on the first page that the teacher goes into breaking this project down into 6 steps. That first sentence is the most academic jargony first sentence of a research project that I have ever seen. Look at it, has all the hallmarks of someone with a PhD or someone who knows someone with a PhD writing it. There's an acronym. There's all these words ending in ing. That is typical academia. We have all these words that end in y or isms or ings. And it's just like, okay, what do these words mean? What are you actually specifically calling on your students to do? What, for example, is a community-based research approach? It's all just like, sophisticated sounding academic jargon that, again, really kind of doesn't make clear what actually people are being called on to do. So let's go through these steps, which are, by the way, kind of funny because the deadlines are just very kind of indicate that the expectations of students are not particularly strenuous in high school. Let's look at the first step. By Thursday, November 16th, a student needed to have come to class having identified a social issue that they will base their project on, a social issue that impacts the local community or another local community. Wow, that is really intense, arduous homework. I bet a lot of students spent a lot of time at home researching and taking that task seriously. I bet you that most of them just showed up to class that day, and when the teacher said, "What is the social issue that you're doing?" they just picked something out of the sky. Immigration. Oh my gosh, I wish that my homework in high school was that easy. Okay, so they have to identify an issue, then they have to gather data. So the step says gather data, and then here's the description. Gather data about the social issue you choose. This could include researching. Oh my God. Gather data, including researching. Pretty redundant if you ask me. Okay, then they're supposed to analyze the data, create a plan, take action. And by the way, the description under the take action category is take action. This includes putting your plan into action. Wow. Smart. And then the final step here, step 6, is reflect. Reflect on the impacts and effects of your project. Okay, looking here at step 3, which is analyze the data, I want to highlight something. And again, this both plays to the 2 main criticisms that I have of this project. The first one being that the methods, the really academic orientation of this project, to me, is not conducive to actually facilitating learning and growing. And then the second part is kind of a more like moral view of this project, which is that it's just too pie in the sky. And if you want to encourage students to actually make a change, they need to do that on a smaller scale in their own lives instead of going out and being a social justice warrior. Let's look here at this sentence. It says, analyze data to identify the root causes of the issue and potential solutions. Identifying the root cause of some of the issues that are being encouraged here, and we're going to see on the next page, these are big issues: homelessness, racism, LGBTQ rights. Identifying root causes of those issues is very difficult to do. Let's take homelessness, for example. How can you possibly simplify and identify the root causes of homelessness. There are so many. It is so vast. And by the way, it is very individual. Some people are homeless for a few days. Some people are homeless for a few years. Some people are homeless for their whole lives. Some people are homeless because they got evicted from their apartment buildings and they lost their jobs and they had, a bout of bad luck. Some people are homeless because they have terrible drug and alcohol addiction issues. Some people are homeless because they were born into a family situation where their parents were probably homeless. How can a student possibly identify the root issues of an issue, again, as huge as this? Before we continue, I want to tell you about MyPillow. I use many MyPillow products. I walk into work every day wearing the My slippers, and then I quickly change into heels. I sleep on the MyPillow in the Giza Dream bed sheets, and I use My towels, among other products. And you can get many of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman. MyPillow's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you'll get 60% off of the aforementioned Giza Dream bed sheets that comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll get a set for as low as $39.99 with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you'll get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, the MyPillow towel sets, and more. It is both morally wrong and academically ill-advised to have students just simplify these concepts into these bullet points or these these lines for a final project and potential solutions. All of this stuff sounds great. It sounds sophisticated. It sounds like you're, training the next generation of change makers. But I think it's just going to fuel students to come up with more academic jargon. How can you expect a ninth grader to really present a solution to the issue of homelessness? I understand you want to get people, thinking in these terms and maybe trying to figure out how would I solve some of these big issues. But it's just too big, too unrealistic, and too pie in the sky to expect of a ninth grader. Okay, let's go to the next page, page 2, which shows you some of these issues that the teacher is encouraging students to consider for their final project. The step here is identify a social issue that impacts your local community or another local community. Topics we've discussed in class. Racism and discrimination. You knew that was going to be the first one. Police brutality. Quality of schools and education. LGBTQ rights. Violence against the trans community, labor rights, working conditions and pay, immigration, Southeast Asian deportation, impact of COVID on Filipino nurses, that's pretty specific, war and genocide, and indigenous rights. And then I'll summarize some of the other ones that she is offering for their consideration. As I mentioned, homelessness, stereotyping, climate change and pollution, mental health, gender wage gap, drug use among teens, homophobia, peer pressure, suicide, border crisis, school shootings, sexual assault, guns, and divorce. Okay? A lot of these issues kind of reveal that we live in a culture which tends to externalize a lot of things. I know from looking at the other course materials that a lot of these issues are sort of presented in a way such that they are deemed to be everyone else's fault. The insidious effects of white supremacy or discrimination or misogyny has created these issues. This is a huge externalization culture that we live in. And again, one of the moral issues that I take with this project is that if you really want to make a change, if you want to teach students how to improve their lives or improve the lives of those in their local community, you don't do it by going out and externalizing issues and succumbing to this kind of exhibitionist culture of going out and protesting and fighting climate change and discrimination and racism. You do it on a very small, micro, individual level. If Julie Hartman were the teacher of this this class and designing this final project. I wouldn't encourage students to go out and identify this huge issue and then write a report on it. What I would say to the student is, find someone or something in your own life that you can really improve, and you will see the outcome of your efforts. And start with your friends, start in your school, and start in your family. Once you have done that there, then you can go out and be a social justice crusader. But start with the people who you know and who you can make an impact with. For instance, why don't you call your grandmother once a week? Resolve to do that. That will have a direct impact on someone in your own life. Or resolve once a week to go visit your grandmother in the old home where she lives. Or resolve to help your mother or father with chores around the house. Set up a plan for 3 times a week. You're going to wash the dishes or you're going to sweep the floor. Do something on a small scale that is specific. It's not, again, go attend a protest or go, conduct research on this issue. Go out, get your hands dirty, find someone with a name and a face, and figure out how you can improve their lives in a small way. That is how we create change. It doesn't start big. It doesn't start big, It starts small. Also, finally, too, a lot of these issues, in addition to being super macro, super externalized, encouraging you to fight them in what I deem it to be an exhibitionist way, they all kind of have this through line of social justice issues. I used that term just a few moments ago, social justice warrior. That's something that we hear a lot. In the other parts of this course in the curriculum, we see the term social justice being used. That term is a term that we need to see is unclear and subverts the actual idea of justice. The whole point of justice is that justice is carried out on an individual level. You judge a person and what has happened to them or what they did based solely on that criteria. You don't judge them based on their background or their race or their sexual orientation or their previous relations. You judge someone based on an individual scale, and you give consequences accordingly. When you put the adjective social in front of justice, it subverts the whole idea of justice, because if it isn't individual, it isn't justice. You can't carry out justice on a social scale if it is truly justice. You can have social policy, you can, have social analysis, but social justice itself as a term subverts the whole idea that we claim to care about so much, which is justice. So I just want to highlight that. And again, this is the problem with a course like this, because it gives this idea that justice is carried out in a social way when really it isn't. Let's go on to the next few pages. Page 3, the teacher encourages students to consult with certain resources to conduct their research and figure out what they're going to do with this final project. That in and of itself is, I think, a problem. And by the way, the previous page that we looked at, where the teacher suggested all of these issues, racism, LGBTQ rights, homelessness, etc., that also I take issue with. You know why? Because it subverts the whole idea of research. If you are supposed to identify an issue in your local community, here are the steps of the process. You go out in your local community, you do research there. Based on your research, you figure out what the issue is, and then that's how you select your issue for your final project. What I don't like about this is that it's planting the seeds of what the issue is going to be before you've conducted the research of that issue. It's like, go out and research the social issue of racism. What if in your own local community racism isn't a huge issue? It subverts this whole process of academia. When academia is done right, you follow a certain process and you find something to identify and then you analyze it. It is not research if you already know the answer of the thing that you are going to find. Just a little note. But we see here, in addition to the teacher kind of planting the seeds of what the outcomes of the research are going to be, the organizations that this teacher is presenting for the students' consideration are just so rancid. I'm sorry to say it that way, but it's true. For instance, let's look here at this Instagram account called LA Students Deserve. This is a big protesty social media account. I'm putting up a photo here of one of their posts, which is about divesting from the school police program. That's just one of the posts. Some of the other posts I found are about protesting the Supreme Court's overturning affirmative action, and then another post was protesting charter schools. But the through line here is not people going out and actually making change and impacting their local community on an individual scale, but going big and protesting and carrying signs and fueling their outrage. It's just the wrong way, morally, intellectually and spiritually, to direct students to go. Another source which the teacher encouraged people to look at was the Black Lives Matter chapter of Los Angeles. People who are still encouraging others to donate to or support or consult with anything Black Lives Matter says, it is just beyond my comprehension. Black Lives Matter has ruined the lives of countless Black people through their policies such as defunding the police, such as abolishing certain bail programs. That has not harmed rich white people behind gates in dormant buildings. That has harmed overwhelmingly minority communities where crime is the highest and police are needed most. Black Lives Matter is an organization embezzled millions of dollars that was supposed to go to Black Americans and instead pocketed it so that they could buy mansions in Los Angeles. Why in the name of God is this teacher, especially if she is a social justice crusader and, wants to fight racism and discrimination against Black people, why in the name of God is she encouraging people to give any credence to that sick, deranged organization called Black Lives Matter? It's just terrible. But we see similarly exhibitionist, externalized, protesty posts on this BLM page. For instance, one of them is called Black Christmas, and it is encouraging people who follow the account to take money, withhold money, it says, from white corporations that fund Black oppression. Then there's another source, which the teacher cites, that's called Human Rights in the Philippines. It's an Instagram account, and I found a post about actually weirdly alluding to Israel on this Instagram page. This is picture 3, and it says that the Palestinians are victims here of fascist oppression. I just want to give you kind of an idea of the kinds of movements, the kinds of activists that this teacher is encouraging students to consult with. And another source here is Planned Parenthood. I want to pull up picture 5. And one of the first posts on this Instagram page of Planned Parenthood, which the teacher is encouraging people to consult with, is where people can go schedule an abortion appointment. Again, just gives you a kind of idea of the kinds of organizations which the head of this class is supporting. On a final note, I want to say that we are in a time where a lot of us are reacting to the different kinds of malignant moral confusion that we are seeing. Obviously, most recently, it's been anti-Semitism on college campuses. And I just want to make the point that courses like these, even if the teachers and the designers of the course have good intentions, have a way of kind of inculcating and festering a lot of the kinds of moral confusion that we are seeing by overhyping the extent to which certain social issues like racism or violence against the trans community exist. Do those exist in some ways? Of course. But to say they are these huge, pressing, glaring problems is just not in accordance with the data. Another problem is encouraging students to go out and protest and have this kind of rage. I just want to highlight for you that all of these are kind of pieces of a puzzle, where we're seeing a lot of students come out of the education system, whether that be high school and college, with a kind of rage and self-righteousness and morally confused and distorted idea of their own country and of the world. And I think we ought to look at curriculum and courses like these to understand where those seeds are planted. Again, either inadvertently or advertently. So thank you very much to the student for sending this to me. Thank you all so much for listening to this. Again, my email is julie@julie-hartman.com. I would love to hear from you, and whatever things you send to me that I can expose, I will happily do so. See you all soon. Take care.